In this video, what I'm going to do is point out some different tips as you go through and solve a free response question. Now, in a traditional test, we have 4 questions for 90 minutes, which is 22.5 minutes per question. On the modified AP test this year, due to COVID-19, we're going to see a 45-minute free response test only. So I'm assuming we will have 2 free response questions, but we will get more details later. For now, let's go ahead and let's just practice some old free response questions. All right, so if we look at this problem, a couple of things I want you to notice right off the bat are these gray blocks that we see here that are highlighting the method headers. These are important to recognize because these are all of the methods that you'll be working with within the AP problem. So some of these are methods that you will write. We can tell that because it says here to be implemented in part A and to be implemented in part B. Others are methods that you will not write. Here it says implementation is not shown, implementation is not shown. And in this case, these are methods that are provided for our use that we do not have to write, and really we just have to understand that they are there. So it's super important that you read the documentation for these methods so that you know how to use them to help you. You are expected to use these methods. Okay? All right. And so let's go ahead and let's just take a look at what we've got going on here. First of all, we have the precondition, postcondition. So precondition is essentially what we know to be true as we enter the method. So postcondition is what we know to be true as we leave the method. And again, I apologize. My handwriting is just not the greatest, so hopefully you can bear with me here. So if we take a look at this first method that we see that we're going to be writing, GetColumn, we know the precondition is that C is a valid column index. Now this is super important to read this part here. When we know it's a valid column index, that means that we already know that whatever number C is, it will not generate an out of bounds error. This is important to read this information because it saves you the step of having to check for that. Now, we also know in our post condition that the array is unchanged. So that means that no matter what you do in your method, at no point are you ever changing any values of this parameter ARR2D. And it's also important to read that because we know that arrays, when we pass an array name as a parameter, it is a reference to an object because an array is an object. So if you were to make changes to this array in the method, those changes would actually change the array after the method is done, making it changed. However, this method leaves the array unchanged. So it's really important that we recognize those keywords there. Another keyword in this method header is static. And when we see that a method is static, that means that it is invoked by the class name. So since these methods are part of the ArrayTester class, we are going to have to say ArrayTester.getColumn. All right. So when I would use this method, I would say ArrayTester.getColumn, and then I would pass to it the array in question and the column number that I wanted to get. Okay, so now that we understand how this method is supposed to work, we can go ahead and actually write the code for it. All right, so let's go ahead and let's move on down and just start reading the rest of the problem. And we'll get back to the other methods when we get to part B. Okay, so we want to write the static method, getColumn, which returns a one-dimensional array containing elements of a single column in the two-dimensional array. The elements of the returned array should be in the same order as they appear in the given array. And then they're also just reminding you of the way the notation works. So RC refers to row R and column C. Then here, this is where they are going to give you an example. Now, it's always super important to read over the example to make sure you understand how the code's supposed to work. So notice here again, we are seeing the way that that code is called via class name.method name because it is a static method. And what is being passed is the array name and then the column name. So here, because I am asking for column 1, we know the indices start at index 0. I am asking for column 1, and that column is going to be returned as a one-dimensional array with the values in the same order that we see here. So 1, 4, 7, 5. So things that I'm going to need to do here, let's do a little bit of planning. So first of all, before I can return an array, I'm going to need to create an array. And we know when we create an array, we have to give it a size, and its size will be equal to the length of the column. So in this case, my column has 4 values, so that would be an array of size 4. If my two-dimensional array column had length of 10, it would be length of size 10. We want to make sure that this value is not hard-coded. We want to never hard-code those values unless we are told it would always be 5, for example. But unless we're told it's always going to be a certain value, we want to use things like the array name.length or array name bracket 0.length to get the number of rows or number of columns for that size. Secondly, after we create the array, then we're going to use a loop to fill the array with each value in the column. And then after we've created the array and we've used a loop to fill the array, then the final thing that we're going to need to do is we need to return the array. All right, so let's go ahead on the next page and we're going to actually write the code for this. All right, so here we're going to go ahead and we're going to write our code to go along with this problem. Now to save a little bit of time here in the video, I have the solution already written out for us. You'll notice that the method header was already provided. So when the method header is already provided, you don't need to rewrite it. Okay, so we can see this first part here. This is where we are in fact going ahead and creating the new array. Now you'll notice that this spot right here, this is the length of the array, and the length of the array is equal to the number of elements in the column, and the number of elements in the column is also the same as the number of rows. And so that's why we see array2d.length. Next, we go ahead and we see the loop, and that's what this part is right here. This is our loop to go ahead and fill that array. And when we fill the array, we're basically saying, okay, well, for every row starting from the first one until the end of the array, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill that entry with the entry at that appropriate row and column. Now you'll see here that we have 2 parameters. We have RC. Now, while it looks like we have 2 variables that are changing, recall that C was passed in as a parameter to our method header. So if it was column 1, that's going to be 1 the whole time. If it was column 3, that would be 3 the whole time. And the row value, this is the value that's going to change. So that would be row 0, and then let's say column was 1, column 1. Row 1, column 1, row 2, column 1, row 3, column 1. And that would go through for as many rows that were in the array. And then once I fully filled that one-dimensional array, then that last step that I need to do is I need to go ahead and I need to return my array. All right, now if we were to look at the points rubric for a problem like this, let's go ahead and see how the points would be broken down for this part right here. This chart that you see up here on the top goes ahead and analyzes how those 4 points would be assigned for part A of the problem. So when you're looking at the FRQ guides, and these are all publicly available online, you can just do a quick Google search. They can be very useful for you, but I would recommend not looking at them until you have tried the problems. Otherwise, you're just cheating yourself of good problems to try. So you'll notice that the 4 points, the first one is for just creating an array. So just making that array. Even if you don't know how to fill it, just make the array. Next, we have to go ahead and we have to access all of the values without a bounds error. So you want to make sure that you are going through and setting up that for loop correctly. Then you are going to assign 1 value to every value in your new array. And then last, that new array has all the values and it has been returned. Okay. Now things that lose points. It talks about here that you would lose a point if you switch the indices. You would lose a point if you worked with an array list and if you used array list methods to add it to an array. And then it also talks about other ways that you would lose points here as well. So when you're going through and grading yourself, these are ways that you can try and check to make sure you've done everything that you need to do. All right, now the video is going to only allow me to record 15 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop the video here, and I will record another segment for part B of the problem.